Hello, welcome to the live class. Happy Saturday. Today we are talking about cooking and cooking vocabulary. Mostly because this past week I had a cooking related class with a student and I realized how much vocabulary there was, so I thought that would be a perfect topic for a live class. And hello, how's everyone doing today? I hope you are ready to practice your English. Yeah, my day, it's early here because it's only 10 in the morning, so I have not done that many things. My day has been going well so far. It's a pretty kind of like cold, cloudy day here, so it feels like a lazy morning to me, but I got up, I checked my email, I took a shower. Nothing too interesting to report. What about you guys? I know for some of you, it's a very different time of day. Like if you're in the Middle East, Asia. Are any of you cooks? Do you like to cook? Are any of you a good cook or a fan of cooking? Personally, I always liked cooking. I remember when I was younger, I really liked the Food Network channel. If anyone else here was a fan of the Food Network channel, and I would watch it after school a lot when I was in middle school. It's 16. I would say 4 p.m. We don't typically in English say the number in the 24-hour clock. Usually we say, unless you're in the military, in which case they say 1400 hours. But normally we would say 2 o'clock. I'm going to get us started. Okay, so my first question here for you today. As a man, we don't like cooking, we just order from restaurants. That's a bold statement. I will tell you, in my family, my father always was much more of a cook compared to my mom. So I think that does not apply for every man. My dad loves cooking, so I think it depends on the man. But I think it's maybe more related to cultural customs, like some men learn how to cook and others do not. I think in the case of my dad, he taught himself how to cook. So it's more, for me, what's expected of you based on society, perhaps. Because I know a lot of women that don't really like to cook also. I just cook for necessity. I need to eat. Yeah, some people are like that. And some people do that in the fitness way, like I need this many grams of protein and this much fiber and stuff like that. So some people cook in a very methodical way. Okay, I like cooking men, they are sexy. You heard it here first. I think it's related if you're trained or not. True. I personally think it's a very important life skill, like to be able to feed yourself. And then I also feel like it's empowering to be able to make food the way that you like it. I just know how to fry eggs and fish when I cook. Okay, well, you're not going to starve, so it's good to know how to make the basics. But I would say fish, that's not so basic. That's a good thing to know how to cook. So tell me, what cooking methods do you know? I'm thinking of ways of cooking. Okay, we have to fry, yes. And what kind of things do you like to fry? You can deep fry something when you put it in a bath with a lot of oil, or we also stir fry something. In a lot of East Asian cuisine, they have a stir fry, which is like when you use a wok and cook the food in a little bit of oil. So different types of frying. To grill, yeah. If you grill something, it's both the noun and also the action. So you can have a grill and grill on your grill. I am from Morocco, so we have many methods for cooking. Okay, today will be good practice if you can describe any of the preparations that you have in your country, because I think it's very common when you're talking to someone in English that you're talking to someone not from your country, right? If you're a person that's not a native English speaker. And so it's very typical that you need to explain what your dishes are and how to make them in a way for other people to understand. These ones, like egg and potato, are more ingredients to boil or to roast. The recommendation is not to fry, but some foods are good with oil. I agree with that. It makes it taste really good. But also, that's why now I have an air fryer, which is nice because you can get the same crispiness without using as much oil. Like, you don't really need to use oil, or sometimes I use a little oil, but it makes it crispy. But I agree, it's really good when things are fried, but it's good to watch out for your oil intake. I am Hispanic. In my culture, we learn the methods of our grandparents. Okay, for example, do you guys have any examples of what kind of things you learned to cook from your grandparents? To grill, to boil, to fry, instead of to oven. So the oven is the appliance that you use, but the action is to bake. And we have to bake and to roast. To bake usually is with cakes or casseroles or dishes where you want to maintain some moisture. And then to roast is like roasted chicken where you want it to be nice and crispy on the outside. Banana cake is delicious. It's very typical in the US that we call it banana bread, but it's a cake, like a dessert with a lot of sugar. But you can hear people say banana bread, and it's actually banana cake. So be aware if you guys order a banana bread and you expect bread. We have a meal in winter which is, what is jalban with eggs? Can you explain what is jalban? I have here some different words that we can look at related to ways of preparing foods. So one way that we might prepare food is boiling something. When you boil something, you are cooking it at 100 degrees Celsius. So it starts to make the big bubbles. That is to boil something. And if any of you have an example of a food that you prepare using any of these words, my goal for you today is to be able to be more specific when you're talking about foods or a dish that you prepare. So we have to boil. You have the big bubbles, as opposed to simmer. Simmer is when you cook on medium heat. You reduce the heat from the boil, and you have small bubbles. When I was at my mother's house yesterday, I toasted our croissants. Oh, brochen. I guess we would say our pieces of bread or rolls. If it's rounded, we call it a roll, like a dinner roll. But if it's to toast something to spread on, I would say our bread or pieces of bread. I don't know if we have a different way when it's like individual breads. If it's rounded, I would say dinner rolls. But if it's flat, I would just say bread or pieces of bread. Unless if anyone else has another word that they use related to bread, let me know. You can boil potatoes, exactly. Boil water. When you used to work at a bakery. Okay, yeah. If any of you used to work in cooking or at a bakery, this is good vocabulary to talk about your previous job. Then we have to steam. To steam, you normally use a steamer. The steamer helps you cook foods using the vapor, the water that is coming off of the hot steamer that you're using. So you might steam vegetables when you don't want to put them in the whole pot of water, but you want to use the steam to cook them and have them maintain some of their texture. That would be to steam something. We Indians have the most diversity in food, so we make a bread called rotio by a puffing method and bread made up of millet flour. Okay, is that the same as roti? I've gone to an Indian restaurant before and seen roti as an option. I don't know if that is related, but it was a type of bread, so I imagine. Roast barbecue. Then we have to bake and to roast, which I mentioned before. In Mexico, we call that baño María, to steam. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that. To grill, which is very common. I don't know if any of you are living in North America, but at least in the United States, in the summer, it's very common to grill. Grill meat, grilled corn on the cob. In Brazil, it's used to cook no vapor. Okay, I steam vegetables. And to steam is a very healthy way to cook, I think. Obviously not the same as deep frying in terms of flavor. In Argentina, it's also called baño María. Okay. Yes, all of these are verbs. So, for example, I'm boiling the water for pasta. After the soup comes to a boil, reduce the heat and let it simmer for 10 minutes. Steaming your vegetables is a healthy preparation. I am going to bake cookies for my friends. Let's roast the broccoli and chicken. I want to grill the meat at the park. And to sauté, this is like to cook in a pan vegetables, for example, until they're soft. So I sautéed the vegetables in the pan on the stove. What do you guys think? Which one is healthier? I think to steam would be probably the healthiest preparation here, because to steam and boil, you're not using any oil for those two. For the rest, you often have some sort of oil unless you air fry. Many of Gujarati food, dokia, common, and umbadiyu are made by the steaming method. Okay, that's interesting. I simmer the soup to blend the flavors. Yeah, I can explain the verb to simmer is similar to boil. So we have boil and simmer. In both of these, you're cooking a liquid so that it makes bubbles. But to boil is 100 degrees Celsius, big bubbles. To simmer is when after it boils, you reduce the heat and you have small bubbles. So it's cooking a liquid, but with medium heat and not high heat. That is to simmer. Tiny bubbles. In a recipe where you need to boil something and then change the heat so that it's not I don't know, releasing big bubbles and it has small bubbles, you're simmering the pot or the water. Steamed eggs prepare meringues. Okay, I've never prepared meringues before. How do you guys prepare meringues? I don't know, is it steamed eggs or whipped eggs for meringues? My mother told me to boil tea better in order to make it better. What did she tell you? Like to change the temperature? Because I've heard that before. If you boil something like if you if you steep the tea at too high of a temperature, it can make the tea bitter, especially when it's green tea. We toast seeds of wheat to make coffee. Is it correct to say fry pan pizza? I would say pan fried pizza. So pan fried pizza is delicious. This is a common adjective. It's a compound adjective, pan fried. Healthier, I think, is when you boil or use the grill. Yeah. Don't you boil vegetables instead of using roast? It depends. If you are boiling, that means you're putting them into a pot with very hot water. Like with potatoes, you probably boil them. If you're roasting vegetables, that means that you're putting them in the oven in order to get crispier on the outside. So roasted vegetables would be like if you put carrots and broccoli into the oven and you want them to be kind of charred or crispy on the outside, that would be to roast vegetables. Fermenting is part of cooking, yeah. Are you guys fermenting anything? I'm trying to make some kombucha at home, but I don't know if it's going very well. Simmer might follow boiling. Yes. Simmering for making salsa, for making sauce, I would say. So this is something very interesting in English, especially in the US. I think also in British English, salsa specifically is Mexican sauce, is specifically the type of sauce that you see in Mexico, like pico de gallo, like any sort of Mexican tomato-y spicy sauce is salsa. Any other sauce like Italian or for pasta or any of that is called sauce. So be careful when you guys say salsa, we only think of the Mexican salsa. We make many Indian foods that require fermentation. Boiling Indian tea twice or 3 times makes it even better. Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah, I can explain to steam food. I don't have a steamer, but basically you cook the food in the steam and not directly in the water. So when the water is very hot, it releases steam and you use this hot vapor to cook the food and not the water. So you need to have a steamer. I think you can also find other ways to do it, like if you have a boiling pot and then put something on top where the food is not in the water but is being cooked by the steam. That would be a steamer. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has any more examples of foods that you steam. I'm thinking of vegetables. Maybe also are tamales steamed? Like that sort of food, I think it might be cooked in steam. I used to fry my food until my doctor told me it was better to boil or steam it. Now I add the grill to the backyard to avoid roasting all meat. Okay, interesting. I think that's true. A lot of us... Salsa is a type of music, yes. If you say salsa to a gringo, we understand Mexican sauce or the music or the dance. I think you can only cook vegetables that way. I think also tamales, like if you put them inside of a device where only the steam cooks them, but not directly in the fire or the liquid, that is to steam. Okay, nice job everyone with these words. And then sauté, right? That is if you are a Spanish speaker, sautear in the pan. So that's a good word. That is one where we took the word from French. That happens sometimes with different cooking vocabulary. Let me change. This is an idiom that I have that I want you guys to look at. So I honestly think that this is very true when you're talking about cooking. A watched pot never boils. I don't know if any of you have heard this expression before, or maybe you have a similar expression in your language, but do any of you know this expression, a watched pot never boils? Have you heard it before? A watched pot never boils. And what does it mean if you have heard it before? What does this mean? Yes, it's like what Ginny said. If we wait for a bus, the bus is not going to come. Yeah. So if you start to boil in your kitchen, if you put a pot on the stove to boil the liquid and you just watch and watch and watch, it's going to take forever. It will never boil. But if you leave the pot to boil and you maybe kill time doing something else or focus on a different thing, in that time where you're not obsessed with the pot, watching the pot will boil. So that is the meaning of this expression. Yeah. So when you're waiting for something, you can make it more difficult for yourself. When you are expecting something to happen, the time passes very slow. To wait for something to happen and it seems like endless time. If you sit around doing nothing, like watching the pot and waiting for it to boil, it seems like it's never going to happen. That's a really good explanation. And maybe in life, you could also use this expression. If you apply for a job and you still haven't heard back and you're checking your email every day, obsessed with them responding to you, it feels like the time is taking forever to pass. So that's the similar idea with a watched pot never boils. And I don't know about any of you if you like cooking, but this definitely happens to me when I'm in the kitchen. I feel like whenever I'm focused on something finishing in the oven or boiling or something like that, I feel like the time goes by a lot slower. Okay, so that's an idiom. A watched pot never boils, but we're going to go to some other vocabulary. This, I think, is interesting when we're talking about how to prepare vegetables, because a lot of my students, and this is very normal, I think, with any language learner, when you're explaining a recipe, you might only use the verb to cut. Oh, I cut the peppers. But in different recipes, different types of cutting are necessary. So, for example, if you do not care about the size and shape, it does not need to be perfect, you might do a rough chop. So a rough chop is where you cut without paying attention to the vegetables looking uniform or coming out in strips or in a specific way. Typically, I only really rough chop something like cilantro, for example, where you can have pieces of different sizes and it doesn't change the outcome of the dish. With vegetables, it's tricky because if you're going to cook the vegetables, they might be unevenly cooked. I suggest everyone hear the Sting song Heavy Clouds But No Rain. Okay, thank you for the recommendation, the song recommendation. Okay, so that is a rough chop. And if any of you have a vegetable that you normally roughly chop, I said cilantro, but perhaps there are others. British English, they call it coriander. In the US, we say cilantro. We only say coriander for the seeds, actually. Then we have to julienne, which is funny. I don't know if anyone here's name is Julianne, but then we have to julienne. To be honest, you also might see the word to slice into, to thinly slice when you slice something. The other ones that we have are, and julienne is only used with vegetables, but slice can be used with a lot of things like sliced cheese, sliced bread, etc. To dice, if you know what dice are, they are the cubes that you use for board games. So you might dice something to cut it into cubes. You might finely dice something where you cut it into smaller cubes. And finally, to mince. To mince something is when you cut it so small that it kind of gets a little bit mushy. I feel that the most common example of this is garlic. The way that we cut garlic into very tiny pieces so it's a little bit like a garlic mush. That is to mince something. And if any of you live in the UK, they have minced meat pie, which is, I guess, meat with minced veggies inside of a crust, kind of like a empanada, but British. Mince is similar to chop, but it's very tiny. So the difference with mince and chop is that mince is always referring to very tiny pieces. Chop could be rough chop or finely chop. It's a more general word to chop. So those would be the different preparations of vegetables. We have to chop, slice. Slice is like long, skinny, slender strips, if that helps you remember slice. We have chop and slice. Okay. I also wrote here how to prep veggies. Prep is a shorthand way to say prepare, but it's very common to use when talking about cooking and food. So food prep, meal prep, to prep. In the past, it was only the short version of prepare, but now people use it like its own verb. I need to prep the veggies. For example, potatoes could be roughly chopped. Exactly. You could roughly chop potatoes. Exactly. When they're kind of bigger pieces, not so exact or tiny. Roughly chopped. I think about the form when I related to slices. Yeah, exactly. Slice is something skinny. We have another saying in English. If I don't know about every English-speaking country, but it's very common in the US that people say that something is the best thing since sliced bread. I could say, this class is the best thing since sliced bread. And the idea is that sliced bread, it was such a revolutionary and amazing invention, especially for people from the US, that If something is the best thing since sliced bread, it's an amazing invention or something that is incredible. It's the best thing since sliced bread. And yeah, veggies instead of vegetables. It's definitely informal, but it's a very common shorthand for vegetables is veggies. To mince vegetables for the children's food. Yeah, a lot of children eat like mushed bananas, mushed peas, because mush is like when something is textureless. It's like a goo. Mushed peas, for example. I don't know if any of you guys have ever tried baby food. Kitchen actions. These are more things that we can do in the kitchen, and they are all verbs. So they are all used like the subject and then the verb. So again, this is another opportunity for you to give me specific examples, especially if you have a food from your country that might be difficult for another person to understand if you don't use the correct vocabulary. Oh. To peel. To peel, you might use a peeler to peel. You can peel a banana with your hands. You don't need a peeler. You should not use a peeler for a banana, actually. You should use the peelers that God gave you to peel a banana. But you might need a peeler for something with a harder peel, like a potato or an apple if you're making some preparation where you don't want the skins. So that is to peel. Potatoes, carrots, apples. Yeah, also the carrot, because sometimes the outside is kind of interesting looking. So you want to peel it off. A lot of people touched your carrots when they were in the grocery store. So good to peel them. Toss. Yeah, okay. If you guys have anything like a salad with homogeneous ingredients where you want to mix them up, you might also say toss the salad. We have to grate. Yes, exactly, Gerald. Pelar patatas. Eso sería peel potatoes. Then we have to grate. Grate has the exact pronunciation, the same pronunciation as you are great. You're a great person. You're a great person because you grated the cheese for me. Thank you. You use a grater to grate. A grater is that metal contraption with tiny holes where you rub the cheese up and down and it breaks down into small skinny pieces. That's my explanation of a grater. So if anyone else has a way to describe that, go for it. You might grate potatoes if you're making, I think, like a certain type of hash brown, or you might grate cheese is very common for it to be in smaller pieces like shredded cheese. Then we have to mix and stir. Both of these are used in a very similar way. You have a spoon and you combine a mixture together. You might also hear people say the idiom to stir the pot, like she likes to stir the pot. That's like she likes to be a little bit chaotic and change things for the sake of creating chaos. So if you're like, Maggie, why did you yell at that old man? Oh, I just like to stir the pot. Just choosing chaos today. Stir and mix. Yes, in the context, you might see them used in different ways, but in the specific context of you have a bowl with ingredients to make a cake, you can stir or mix the batter. Both are perfect, but mix you could also use as a noun. So if you buy at the supermarket a packet of dry ingredients to make brownies, that would be brownie mix or cake mix. When you buy that pre-prepared powder to mix with the wet ingredients. As a noun, we say mix. But in this case, when we're using it like as a verb, both are interchangeable. I stir the pot way too much. Me too. I put down the ladle. Then we have to whisk or beat. You can see both of these used in recipes where you need to beat an egg. It's like mix the egg really fast. So both of these are used a lot with eggs. You could also whisk heavy cream to make whipped cream. Anything where you want to get kind of air bubbles into something. Most typically with eggs or cream to make whipped cream. I do it every morning. Do you mean that you whisk eggs every morning or beat eggs, or that you stir the pot? Then we have to knead. To knead has the exact pronunciation of the verb need, N-E-E-D. So we have K-N-E-A-D and N-E-E-D are both verbs that have the exact same pronunciation. We need dough when making bread. That is the most common situation where you need something. It's when you take the dough and you put pressure on it. You're putting pressure on the dough before letting it rest and rise. That is to knead dough. I brew my coffee every morning or I turn into a monster. True. You can brew coffee or you could brew tea. I'm more of a coffee drinker myself because maybe tea later in the day. In the morning, coffee. Yeah. For a hotcakes mixture, I would mix or stir that. You could beat the egg and add it into the hotcakes mixture or mix it into the hotcakes mixture. I whisk the egg and mix them with the oatmeal. You eat eggs mixed into your oatmeal? That's very interesting. I have never heard of that preparation before. A mixture, the word dough is a mixture of eggs, flour, and ingredients for something that you're going to bake. So you can have pasta dough, bread dough, cookie dough. It's the masa, if any of you guys speak Spanish. So that is dough. And actually, the original spelling of donuts was D-O-U-G-H-N-U-T-S because they were made of dough. But over time, we simplified the spelling to D-O-N-U-T-S. Pizza dough. Also, pizza dough. Tortilla de avellana. I've never heard of that before. Oh my goodness. That just blew my mind. Not the same as, if you guys, I don't know how it is in The Simpsons in other languages, but in English, Homer Simpson goes, no! And it's the same pronunciation. Then we have to pour. And for some of you that know this word, when talking about rain, it means to rain really hard. So when it rains, it pours. A lot of rain. In the context of cooking, it means to move a liquid into a receptacle. If I have a cup and I pour the water into the cup, I basically drop the water and let it fall into the cup. And that is to pour something, to move a liquid into another container. Yeah, donut dough, exactly. So what I was saying is that in the past, they were called donut spelled in this way, like donut. And with the time, now we call them D-O-N-U-T, donut. Exactly. So to pour in Spanish is vaciar. Dough is for things that you are going to put in the oven. With cake, Here's the thing. This is not because of the oven, but with hotcakes and any type of cake, we say batter instead of dough. For cookies, dough. Bread, dough. Pasta, dough. Cake, batter. Hotcakes, batter. So we have cake batter and cookie dough. But it's not based on the oven, because if you remember that, for example, with pasta dough, we boil pasta dough. Yes, batter with an A, exactly. So we boil pasta dough, but we bake cookie dough. So it's not really depending on if it's in the oven or not. Instead, it's more just that cakes use batter and all of the other things use dough. So hotcakes, I've heard a lot in Mexico. They say hotcakes, perhaps in other countries as well. I always say pancakes in the United States. So you can say hotcakes or pancakes. Okay, I'll go to the next ones. To spread, I made a video about this with my beet hummus, is where you have some sort of paste or topping and you move it smoothly across a surface. So I don't know if any of you like to eat toast or have a particular spread that you like on your toast. In the US, it's very common to eat peanut butter as a spread. So when you're making a sandwich, you might spread the peanut butter. Yes, I made a beet hummus, so that was interesting. Some people were like, I've never seen a red hummus. If you add beets to it, it turns really bright red. In a very dramatic way. Batter is liquid. True, yeah. Batter is thin. So batter is a thinner, that's a good distinction. So batter is thin. Dough is thick. If you think about the difference in texture for when you're making a cake versus cookies, the batter for cake is very thin, and we also say runny. Runny is like liquid. If it's runny. Runny is a word, oh my God, not funny, runny. Runny. This word we also use if you eat fried eggs and you cook a fried egg and the inside, like the orange part of the egg, the yolk, is very liquidy. You can say, I like my eggs runny, runny. Water runs from your pipes. It's like that the liquid comes out if something is runny. Also eggs, oil, vanilla, and other things. I would say that, but in that case, dough, like cookie dough, has basically those same ingredients as batter, but in a different ratio, which makes the batter runny and it makes the dough denser. Because what you're saying is true when it is related to pasta and bread, but we also have cookie dough and other dessert doughs. So I would say that it's more related to the ratio that makes a liquid texture versus a denser texture. But I agree. I think that's a good point, that you would never use batter for something, that is only flour and water. Or something like that. We also have to season. To season is to add salt, pepper, and spices to something. So you can cook something and maybe you could say, ooh, I need to season my chicken with salt and pepper. Does this chicken have any seasoning? Seasoning is the noun. To season something is to add seasoning. When Bad Bunny says, le falta sazón. In English, that is, They are missing seasoning, or they are unseasoned, maybe. They are unseasoned. The last word is garnish. Garnish is to add an extra thing to the plate to decorate. To garnish is basically to decorate. I don't know if any of you have been to a restaurant where they give you maybe some dish like chicken or pasta and they put a teeny piece of mint or a flower or something like that on top of your dish. That is to garnish it. And it might be something that you don't eat. So if you're eating soup and they put some fancy flower on top of your soup, I would say do not eat the garnish. They garnished my soup with a flower. Is garnish only for food or yeah, garnish, you could also maybe use it for baking too. Yeah, it just means adding, it's always used for edible things, so it could be sweet or salty, but adding some additional decoration to the food, like sweet or salty. Guarnizione in Italy. Guarnizione. Probably we got it from a Romance language. I think a lot of cooking vocabulary we get from French, for example. Okay, so today I gave you guys a lot of vocabulary in English related to food and cooking. As a final test for you, I would like for you to tell me how to make a dish that you like or maybe from your culture. So tell me how to make a dish that you like. Try to use any of the cooking verbs or cooking words. And someone asked the difference between to season and to garnish. The difference is that with seasoning, you are adding flavor. The purpose is to add salt to make it saltier, or add pepper to make it taste more like pepper, for example. So that is to season something. To garnish something really is about making it pretty by adding a leaf or flower to it. So that would be the difference. Season is always wanting to adjust or improve the flavor. Yeah, exactly. You don't necessarily eat everything that you add to the dish. Especially if you're in a fancy restaurant, they tend to add more kind of like weird garnishes. In Spanish, when we mix something in the blender, we call the action licuar. To blend. Yeah, that's one that we didn't talk about today. That is to blend. Is to blend something in the blender, to blend. If any of you like to do makeup, you also might hear people say that if you have blush, bronzer, foundation, you need to blend it. Make it so that it is gradual and natural and not like separate colors. I love cooking pasta seasoned with pepper and garnished with a basil leaf. Nice. Roast carrots first, then mix with olive oil, minced garlic, seasoned with salt and pepper. All that you pour in the mixer and you have the mayonnaise. Ooh, roasted carrot mayonnaise. That's so interesting. I've never tried to make mayonnaise before, but that sounds like a good recipe. My favorite dish is Armenian tolma with minced beef, rice, and a lot of seasoning. It's then wrapped in grapevine leaves and is cooked at medium heat. It can be served with plain yogurt. Okay, that sounds good. I'll read this way. It's easier for me to read like this. I'm going to tell you about the method for preparing an Iranian dish. Its name is abgusht. It is one of the healthiest dishes around the globe. First, you need to prepare the ingredients such as meat. Also, you're welcome. I'm glad that you liked the live today. I thought, this kind of vocabulary, we sometimes think when it's an everyday situation that it's basic vocabulary or beginner, but I find that it's some of the most advanced vocabulary because of how specific it is. So it takes a long time to master cooking vocabulary because we can be so specific, slice, chop, dice. The good thing about cooking is it's something that we do often, and so it's a good way to practice English. If you narrate what you're doing while cooking, that's a great strategy. Another good strategy is to try to read recipes in English. So especially if it's something like you're a person that knows how to make cookies and you always make cookies, the next time you make cookies, try to read a recipe in English and follow the recipe. That will really help you because you're combining action and the practical use of language with the words. So you're kind of connecting them to your memory of doing the thing instead of only studying. And that's a great way to remember words. Another thing, if you're a person that has different kitchen appliances like a blender and that sort of thing, you can try to put notes or labels on your different kitchen appliances. And I think that's also a good way to kind of casually remember vocabulary in your everyday life. I like a dip made of tuna. I prepare it blending in the blender a can of tuna, 1 can of veggies, and a spoon of mayonnaise, a spoon of mustard. You can enjoy with Lay's or toast or salty cookies. Or salt, I would say crackers instead of salty cookies. If you guys are thinking of galletas, in English, if they're sweet, they're cookies, and if they're salty, they are crackers. Unless you're British, in which case everything is a biscuit. Chickpeas, peas, potato, tomato paste, and some seasonings. Next, you mix all the ingredients and pour some hot water on them. You let it boil and decrease the heat and let it simmer until it cooks well. Very good. Remember, it cooks well, so with the S. I don't know if it helps, but my phone is in English. Yeah, that's a really good way to incorporate English into your everyday life. I think any small things like make your grocery list in English, read the recipes in English. These are ways, even if you're not living in an English-speaking country, you can try to live your everyday life a little bit more in English. And I think that is very helpful. Okay. I'm waiting for the rest of this Iranian recipe. And then I think I'm going to head out for the day because I have some other things to do. I have my trusty coffee. If you don't follow me on my podcast, Charm English Pod is my podcast. So it will be good listening practice for all of you. Abgusht served with chopped vegetables, sliced onion, and bread. Okay, that sounds really good. And last, chiles en nogada is a traditional Mexican dish. The meat is seasoned with pepper, served with a garnish of pomegranate seeds and chopped coriander. Awesome. Yes, making English nearer and more friendly. That's the goal. All right, amazing job today, everyone. And I hope you have a good rest of your Saturday. I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Have a good rest of your weekend. Bye bye.